So I guess the final story we'll go on to is this really awful one about an an Afghan woman who was brutalised for getting a job as a police officer in Afghanistan. This is a woman called Image One Police called Katera, which is a lovely name actually. It's a very cool name, and she doesn't have a surname, so I'm guessing she comes from a more sort of tribal region. I did have the name of the area actually, but I don't appear to have made a note of it.
It's a part of Afghanistan. But...
Yeah, but she'd gotten a job as a police officer and served for 3 months, and then she was brutally attacked in the streets and she was shot and had her both eyes gouged out, which is horrific. As she says, I wish I'd served in the police at least a year. If this had happened to me after that, it would have been less painful. It happened too soon. I only got to work and live my dream for 3 months. What happened is that her husband had been supportive of this, but her father seems to have been deeply enraged by the idea of her working outside of the home. She says, many times as I went to duty, I saw my father following me. He started contacting the Taliban in the nearby area and asked them to prevent me from doing my job. She said that her father provided the Taliban with a copy of her ID card and that he had called her the day that she was attacked to ask her location. Her attack...
By her father?
By her father. And so this in and of itself is the indication of deep cultural differences between, let's just contrast Britain with Afghanistan, right? And we can look at it in the kind of the formulation of the way that she just views the world. Because I think that this, a story of a tragedy like this isn't normally that instructive to these sort of issues. Normally it's like, oh, that's terrible, that's something that's happened. But I think here that what we're seeing is a very good example of why our culture is not like the culture in Afghanistan. And you can see it in the way that she talks. Many times as I went to duty, how many police in the UK would describe going to work as, I went to my duty? Because there's a lot of assumptions that are packaged into the word duty. Suddenly it is an honor-based concept. You are honor-bound to do your duty under any circumstance where you have a duty, and so if you're just a police officer in the West, you wouldn't formulate it like this because we have a much lower sense of duty and obligation in this way. Because
have you seen I think it's Vice documentary, This Is What Winning Looks Like?
No.
There's a great part in there where he's out with an American in the middle of a rural part trying to impose law and order.
Yeah.
And they get 2 guys from Kabul, the capital, and he's like, I love working with these guys because they believe in law and order, whereas these jokers in the rural areas just don't care. That's good, because that means she's one of these people who actually understands Western values of law and order, all the rest of it. Very basic stuff.
But they're being filtered through the cultural lens that is the honor culture of Afghanistan, which is something that we just don't have over here. We have what's called a dignity culture, so we're concerned about the dignity of the individual, whereas they're concerned about the honor of an institution. The honor and duty come from institutions. And these aren't necessarily formalized institutions, these are social, informal institutions, as in, I won't disrespect you, you won't disrespect me, and everyone will agree that we're not going to disrespect each other, but if something were to happen that was considered to be disrespectful, not necessarily to you, but also to your family and friends, such as in the case of the father saying you shouldn't be working outside of the home, this is disgraceful, this is, not what women are supposed to do under Islam, whatever his reason was, then it becomes a matter of honor to have retribution enacted against her. Her dignity is not actually important in the calculation, the moral calculation of what's happening here. What matters is maintaining the honor of the family name and of the it is primarily the family name. But this is apparently, according to the New York Post, indicative of a growing trend of often violent backlash against women taking jobs, especially in public roles, according to human rights activists in Afghanistan. The activists believe the country's conservative social norms and an emboldened Taliban gaining influence while the US withdraws its troops are driving the escalation. Now, what's interesting about this, the Taliban have disavowed this attack. They've said they didn't conduct this attack, and they recently said that they will respect women's rights under Sharia law, although many educated women have expressed their doubts. The status of women in Afghanistan obviously being very different to the status of women and their rights in the West. But this, I think, is a really good example of how there are incredibly significant cultural differences that lead to day-to-day events that we would consider horrific, but in the Muslim world are not actually very unusual at all, and are just a part of life. If you live in an honor culture, well, family members often kill family members for besmirching the honor of the culture, whereas if you live in a dignity culture, this seems abominable. And we have to at least have an understanding of this.
Yeah. I mean, this ties in with the immigration stuff, where it's
Yes.
like, this is the biggest criticism of Pretty's plan.
Yes.
That it no longer cares at all about where you're from. Well, where you're from matters.
Yeah.
Because you'll bring your own cultural values and your own culture with you, especially if you immigrate in large numbers.
Yeah. And it's just and that's not to say that every single person in these areas has the same beliefs. Obviously, as we can see from this story, there's two conflicting beliefs, and she is appealing to dignity culture. She's saying that it's my dream, my right should be able to get this job, and her
she's the
husband
dissident.
agreed. She's the dissident. That's exactly right. And there's massive cultural retribution from the honor culture that still exists in Afghanistan regarding this. As I say, this sort of conservative culture. It's like, okay, well, I don't know how we can screen these things or anything like that, but these are things we have to take into account. And when you look at some of the attacks that had happened by migrants on Westerners, in fact, many of them, there is a distinct aspect of humiliation to them. There is a distinct aspect of removing honor from the person and degrading them. I know, John. I know. We're not hard and fast on the time. Don't worry. The purpose is to reduce their social status. Oh, right, okay. Well, I guess we better wrap it up there.
We're out of time, folks. Sorry.
Yeah, sorry. But this is deeply indicative of vast cultural differences that have to be addressed, and we can't just pretend they don't exist, because that actually costs lives.
Yeah.
That's suffering for people that you're guaranteeing in the future if we just allow that to carry on.